I've been driving trucks for about 15 years now. Seen a lot of strange things on the road, but nothing like what happened that night. It started like any other job. I picked up a load in Kansas, heading to a small town in Colorado. It was a long route, mostly back roads and highways where you wouldn't see another car for miles. That suited me fine. Less traffic, more time to think. The job wasn't hard, just boring. But sometimes, boring is good. This night was different though. I could feel it as soon as I hit the road. The sky was overcast, no moon or stars to guide me, just the dim glow of my truck's headlights cutting through the darkness. It was around 11 p.m. when I noticed something strange. My GPS started acting up. It wasn't showing any directions, just a blank screen. Great, I muttered, hoping it was just a temporary glitch. I pulled over to reset it, but no luck. The thing wouldn't turn on at all. Now normally I just use a map or my phone, but I'd driven this route so many times that I figured I could make it without GPS. I wasn't worried. After another hour of driving, I started to feel uneasy. I hadn't seen a single car, not even on the other side of the highway. No houses, no signs, nothing. It was just me, the truck, and the empty road. The further I drove, the more it felt like I was moving deeper into some forgotten place. Then I saw it, a figure standing by the side of the road. At first, I thought it was an animal, or maybe a tree, but as I got closer, I realized it was a man. He was wearing an old torn jacket and had a dirty baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. He was just standing there staring at me as I passed by. I didn't stop. Something about him felt off. I kept driving, trying to shake the image from my head, but a few miles down the road, I saw him again. Same jacket, same hat. He was standing in the exact same spot as before. I swear, it was like I hadn't even moved. My heart started racing. I pressed down the gas, trying to get as far away from him as I could. But it didn't matter. No matter how fast I went, no matter how far I drove, he kept showing up, always on the side of the road, always staring. I started feeling trapped, like I was stuck in some kind of loop. The road never seemed to end, and my fuel gauge was dropping faster than it should have. Panic started creeping in. My hands were shaking on the wheel. I wanted to turn around, go back the way I came, but the thought of seeing that man again made my stomach turn. Finally, I spotted a gas station up ahead. Relief washed over me as I pulled into the parking lot. It was one of those old stations, the kind you don't see much anymore. Rusted pumps, flickering lights, and a faded sign hanging crookedly above the door. I got out of the truck and stretched my legs, trying to calm my nerves. The air was cold, colder than it should have been for a summer night. I walked to the pump and started filling up the tank, glancing around nervously. That's when I noticed something strange about the gas station. There were no other vehicles, no attendant inside, and no noise except for the faint hum of the pump. It felt dead. Suddenly, I heard a voice behind me. "Need help, driver?" I spun around and there he was, the man from the road. His face was pale, almost sickly, and his eyes were sunken, like he hadn't slept in days. His lips were cracked, and he was smiling. But it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind that sent shivers down your spine. I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my chest. "No, I'm good," I said quickly, stepping toward my truck. But he didn't move. He just kept smiling, staring at me with those hollow eyes. "You shouldn't be out here, driver. Roads aren't safe at night." I didn't answer. I jumped into the truck, locking the doors behind me. My hands were shaking as I started the engine, the tires squealing as I sped out of the gas station. I didn't look back. For a few miles, I thought I'd lost him. The road was empty again, and I started to relax, telling myself it was all just in my head. But then, in the rearview mirror, I saw headlights, faint at first, then growing brighter. Someone was following me. I tried to convince myself it was just another trucker, but deep down, I knew it was him. The headlights stayed right behind me, never getting closer, but never falling back. My heart raced as I floored the gas, pushing my truck to its limit. For hours, he followed me. The road stretched endlessly before me, the headlights never leaving my mirror. I don't know how long I drove, but eventually, the fuel gauge hit empty. I knew I couldn't keep going. I was out of time. My truck slowed to a crawl and finally stopped, the engine dying with a sputter. I sat there in the darkness, listening to the silence. Then I saw him, standing in the middle of the road, just ahead. He wasn't smiling anymore. He just stood there, waiting. I don't know what happened next. Maybe I passed out, or maybe it was something else. But when I woke up, it was morning, and I was parked at a truck stop, miles from where I'd run out of gas. There was no sign of him, no sign of the endless road or the gas station. Just the normal sounds of the highway. I got out, confused and shaken, but grateful to be alive. I checked my truck, and everything was fine, except for one thing. In the dust on my rearview mirror, someone had written 2 words, "Keep driving." I don't know who or what he was, but I've taken a different route ever since. I've done hundreds of deliveries in my trucking career, but this one was different. It wasn't supposed to be. Just another late-night job. Pick up a load of furniture from a warehouse in the middle of nowhere and drop it off in a town I'd never heard of. Easy money. I left the depot just after 10 p.m., my rig loaded and ready to go. The drive was supposed to take me through some back roads, but that wasn't a big deal. I preferred driving at night, with fewer cars and less noise. It gave me time to think, but that night I could feel something wasn't right as soon as I hit the road. It was like the air had changed, heavy and cold, even though it was midsummer. The road stretched out in front of me, dark and endless. Trees lined either side, their branches reaching out like claws into the night sky. My headlights barely cut through the thick fog that had settled in, making it hard to see much beyond a few feet. I've driven through fog plenty of times, but this was different. It clung to the road, thick like smoke, refusing to lift. About an hour in, I spotted a small diner on the side of the road. It was an old, run-down place, the kind that looked like it hadn't seen customers in years. But the lights were on, and there was a faint glow coming from the windows. I figured I could use a break, maybe grab a coffee to keep me going for the rest of the trip. I pulled in and parked the truck. The diner was completely empty, no cars, no people, nothing. Just the faint hum of the neon sign flickering above the door. I hesitated for a moment, but curiosity got the better of me. As soon as I walked inside, the air felt even colder, like stepping into a freezer. Behind the counter stood an old woman, her back turned to me. She was wiping the same spot on the counter over and over, as if stuck in a loop. "Excuse me," I said, trying to get her attention. She didn't turn around. She just kept wiping. I stepped closer, feeling a chill run down my spine. "Can I get a coffee?" I asked again, my voice shaking a little. Finally, she stopped. Slowly, she turned to face me, and when she did, I felt my stomach drop. Her face was pale and gaunt, her eyes sunken deep into her skull. She smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile that made your blood run cold. "Coffee's on the house, driver," she said, her voice soft and raspy. I wanted to leave. Every part of me screamed to turn around and get out of there, but I didn't. I couldn't. Something kept me rooted to the spot. She poured a cup of coffee and placed it in front of me. The smell was off, bitter and burnt, but I drank it anyway, desperate for something to break the tension. As soon as I took a sip, everything went black. When I came to, I was back in my truck, parked by the side of the road. My heart was pounding, and my head felt like it had been hit by a sledgehammer. I had no memory of how I'd gotten back to the truck, or how long I'd been there. The diner was gone. I checked the clock, 2 a.m. Something was wrong. I felt it deep in my gut. My truck's radio started to hiss with static, and I could hear something faint in the background. At first, it was just a whisper, but as I strained to listen, it became clearer. "Turn back," the voice said. I froze. I'd been a trucker long enough to know when to trust my instincts, and right then, they were screaming at me to turn around. But I was too far into the route, too close to the destination to turn back. I started the truck and continued driving, but the voice didn't stop. It kept whispering through the static, getting louder, more insistent. "Turn back, turn back." I shook my head, trying to ignore it, but the road ahead only got worse. The fog had thickened, and the trees seemed to close in around me. My headlights barely pierced the darkness, and the road started to feel narrower, like it was closing in. That's when I saw it, something standing in the middle of the road. I slammed on the brakes, the truck screeching to a halt. There, standing in the fog, was a figure. At first, I thought it was a person, but as I looked closer, I realized it wasn't. It was tall and thin, its body unnaturally long and twisted. Its head was tilted at an odd angle, and its eyes, those eyes, were black, empty voids staring right at me. My heart was racing, my breath coming in short gasps. I couldn't move. I couldn't look away. The figure didn't move either. It just stood there, watching. Suddenly, the radio crackled again, and the whisper returned, louder this time. "Turn back. Last chance." I didn't need to be told again. I threw the truck into reverse, my tires spinning on the slick road as I backed away. The figure didn't follow. It just stood there, fading into the fog as I sped off. I don't remember much about the rest of the drive. I didn't stop again, not until I reached the town where I was supposed to drop off the load. When I finally parked the truck, my hands were shaking, and I was drenched in sweat. I told the receiver about the fog, the diner, the figure on the road. He looked at me with a strange expression and said, "That diner's been closed for years, driver. Burned down after the owner died in a fire." I didn't argue. I didn't say another word. I just unloaded the truck and left, taking the long way home. I never took that route again. I've been a trucker for almost 10 years now. There's nothing like the open road and the sound of the engine roaring as I head into the night. I've seen a lot of strange things on these highways. Drunk drivers, wildlife darting across the road, even some eerie things I can't quite explain. But what happened to me last year? It still haunts me. It was a chilly night in late November. I was hauling a load from one small town in Pennsylvania to another, deep in the Appalachian Mountains. The road was winding, narrow, and the fog was thick. You couldn't see more than a few feet in front of the truck. It was the kind of night where the world feels like it's pressing down on you, and there's nothing but you and the road. I'd been driving for hours when I saw it, a sign for a rest stop up ahead. Next rest stop, 5 miles, it said. I wasn't tired, but something told me to pull over. Maybe it was the darkness, or maybe the silence, but I felt uneasy. You get a gut feeling sometimes out here on the road, and I've learned to trust mine. I reached the rest stop and parked the truck. The place looked abandoned, run down, with cracked pavement and broken lights. The only thing still glowing was a flickering neon sign that said, "Open 24 hours." A shiver ran down my spine, but I brushed it off. I needed a break, just a few minutes to stretch my legs. I stepped out of the truck, feeling the cold air bite at my skin. The rest stop was dead silent, except for the hum of my engine. I glanced around, noticing how empty the parking lot was. Not a single car. I thought that was strange, but I figured it was just late, and not many people were on the road. As I walked toward the building, something caught my eye. There was a man standing by the edge of the parking lot, half hidden in the shadows. He was tall, wearing a long coat, and just standing there, staring at me. My first thought was that he might need help, maybe his car broke down. But as I got closer, I noticed something off about him. He didn't move, didn't speak. He just kept staring, his face shadowed by the fog. I slowed my pace, suddenly not so sure I wanted to go inside. But then, without warning, the man turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness beyond the lot. A chill crept up my spine again, and I hesitated, glancing back at my truck. Maybe I should just leave. But I didn't. I was already out, and I figured I'd at least use the bathroom before getting back on the road. The inside of the rest stop wasn't much better than the outside. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting long, eerie shadows. The place was completely empty. I walked past the small convenience store, noticing the shelves were bare, no snacks, no drinks, nothing. It was like the place had been abandoned for years. Yet the lights were still on, and the air smelled faintly of old coffee. I found the bathroom at the back. The door creaked as I pushed it open. Inside, it was dimly lit, the mirrors smudged and the sinks covered in grime. I did my business quickly, eager to get back to my truck. As I washed my hands, I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps coming from outside the bathroom door. My heart started racing. I didn't remember seeing anyone else come in. I hadn't heard the door open. The footsteps stopped just outside. I stared at the door, my heart pounding in my chest. "Hello?" I called out, trying to sound calm, but my voice trembled. No response. Just silence. For a long moment I stood there, listening, waiting. Then the footsteps started again, this time moving away. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding, and quickly dried my hands, eager to get out of there. As I stepped back into the hallway, I froze. The man from the parking lot was standing at the far end of the hall, half in shadow, half in the dim light. He was closer now, his face still hidden, but I could see something was wrong with him. His head was tilted at an odd angle, and his arms hung limply at his sides, too long, like they didn't fit his body. I didn't wait to find out what he wanted. I bolted down the hall, back toward the entrance, my boots echoing on the tile floor. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see if he was following me. I burst through the door and ran to my truck, slamming the door shut behind me. My hands were shaking as I fumbled for the keys, jamming them into the ignition. The engine roared to life, and I peeled out of the lot, the tires screeching on the pavement. As I sped away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The rest stop was already fading into the fog, but just for a moment, I saw him again. The man was standing at the edge of the lot, watching me go. His head still tilted, his arms still too long, his face hidden in the shadows. I didn't stop again that night. I drove straight through to my destination, and when I finally pulled into the yard, I sat there for a long time, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. I don't know who or what that man was. Maybe he was just a drifter. Maybe it was my imagination playing tricks on me after too many hours on the road. But deep down, I know there was something wrong with that rest stop. Something unnatural. And every time I pass through that stretch of highway now, I make sure to keep driving, no matter how tired I am. Because I never want to see that man again,